So in today's world, and for us that we often pray for different things that we have to go through, periods of waiting, times of patience, and the many different things that we have to be patient for in our prayers. New job opportunities, certainly I know that one, going through searches right now, waiting for quite some time. But with that, we have to wait quite often with our new job opportunities. We often pray for direction of where we want to go. Lord, would you have me go this direction? Lord, would you have me go that direction? Sometimes we have to pause, wait, and listen for an answer from God. Oftentimes, we have to wait for prayers of healing. Uh, I've been sick many times, as I'm sure many of us here have, and it doesn't happen instantaneously when we get sick. Healing doesn't come right away when we're not having a fun time with the flu, feeling like we're about to die, wanting to roll out and just sprawl out. Healing doesn't come immediately. We have to go through time of waiting. Forgiveness, that's something that does not come quickly. It takes time and patience to be able to grasp forgiveness for forgiving others and asking for forgiveness for ourselves as well. Something I've gone through myself, waiting for a partner or a spouse. There's times that we have prayers of asking the Lord, why have I gone through this? Why I've been praying for so many years, still nothing. We go through periods of time of waiting in that. And something that many of our number, unfortunately, are going through relief from suffering, whatever it may be. Uh, from injuries, from sicknesses, from loss. We want relief from suffering, and we often want it now. And unfortunately, with today's world, it gives us this false belief and this bad mentality of, I prayed for God, I'm going to get it right away. Okay, still waiting. What's up? God, why haven't you given me this thing that I've been praying for? I prayed. Isn't that enough? That should be enough, right? I should be getting this thing that I'm asking for. But that's not how it works. And waiting is uncomfortable. It's not fun sitting there offering prayers day after day, week after week, year after year, and still waiting. And unfortunately, with today, we have a world of instants that give us this false sense. I'm old enough to remember the times when you had to yell out to the house, nobody get on the phone, I have to get on the internet, and you have to wait 5 minutes for the stupid thing to boot up, making this horrendous sound, and you got to sit there and wait. And now you got instant internet access that you can look up on a small little device right here and look up movies. You can watch TV shows. You can surf the web almost instantaneously on that little device now. And we have Amazon that can give you deliveries in the same day sometimes for things that might have taken weeks or so much time to wait for. And we have instant foods now too. Pretty soon, I'm sure we're going to get those rehydrators from Back to the Future too, but still waiting for that. Waiting again. We just have lots of times that we have to wait, but we have the world that gives us the belief that we should be getting instantly. But that's not how it works. I just want to briefly look again at the verse and the scripture reading, more importantly through verse 31. And thank you, Scott, for reading. It says that, yet those who wait for the Lord will gain new strength. They will mount up with wings like eagles. They will run and not get tired. They will walk and not become weary. So I want to see that something that it doesn't say. It doesn't say those who avoid waiting. It clearly says those who wait for the Lord will gain new strength. Waiting is a critical part of our walk with Christ. It's a part of our discipleship. And it's something that we need to learn how to deal with, how to go throughout life with. And there's several examples that I looked through in this study that I had 2 days to get ready for. Thanks, Alex. Sorry. But one of the more well-known examples that we can look at is Joseph. We all know the story of Joseph as we can read through Genesis 37 through 50. We see that he goes from being the favorite son in the family to then being thrown into slavery. And for Joseph, it was a time of 13 years from being sold into slavery to then being second in command of all of Egypt. Now, I just want you to think about, where were you 13 years ago? Now, 2013. Yeah, I was still in Green River, second year in Green River, and the Seahawks were just getting ready for their first Super Bowl winning season. That was 13 years ago. Joseph had to go through so many different things and such tumultuous events in his life that could have changed him. Being thrown into a pit, thrown into slavery, he justifiably could have felt any number of these emotions because, well, he'd just been betrayed by his own family. His brothers had just sold him into slavery. Very easily could have felt betrayed. He could have felt forgotten when he was thrown in prison, there alone. He could have felt easily alone. I have nothing, no one. I've been taken away from everything I've known, everything I've loved, and now I'm in a completely unknown, and I'm all by myself. And he very easily could have been hateful. He could have been, I curse my brothers to my dying breath for what they did to me. I hate them with every fiber of my being. But that's not what Joseph did. The waiting Joseph went through built his character. He went from being his father's favorite son to a slave, to a servant, to then a prisoner, and then to a leader. I have no doubt that those experiences taught him humility, patience, responsibility, and perseverance. And during those times of Joseph's tumultuous time, he learned how to be faithful with little. When he was being sold into slavery, before he was put in charge of Egypt, he was put in charge of Potiphar's house. He was given smaller responsibilities before he was given bigger responsibilities. He proved he could be trusted with smaller things before being charged with larger ones. During the waiting, God was preparing him for the right time. In prison, Joseph's dreams happened when he was younger, but they didn't come true right away. He had to wait. He had to wait many years before he became second in command in Egypt, and that delay allowed the circumstances to develop so Joseph was in the right spot exactly when Pharaoh needed him. And the waiting made the outcome more meaningful. If Joseph had been put in charge right away, right off the bat, he might not have understood what God was doing. His suffering and waiting became part of how his family and many others were saved from the famine. And importantly, Joseph learned forgiveness. When his brothers came to Egypt, he could have very easily thrown them into the prison. He could have had them subjected to any kind of tortures that he could come up with. He could have done anything that he wanted to them. But what he showed was forgiveness. His years of suffering shaped the person he became. And we see that in Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, most importantly. But in Genesis chapter 50, 19 through 21, Joseph said to them, "Do not be afraid, for am I in God's place? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring about this present result, to preserve many people alive. So therefore, do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones." So he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. God's timing can involve a long period of preparation before you see the purpose. Joseph probably couldn't see what the purpose was when he was in slavery and when he was in prison. He couldn't see what it was accomplishing while he was going through it. But looking back after he was placed in charge, he could see how those years shaped him and prepared him for that purpose. And that connects right into Genesis 50:20, that what they intended for harm, God intended for good. God often is preparing us while we're wondering why nothing is happening. It can seem like nothing's going on, nothing's happening, but God is preparing us if we can let Him. Another example, Abraham and Sarah. God promises him a son, and they wait 25 years for that promised son. Now, I don't know about many guys here that would want to volunteer to be a father at 75. Well, be promised a son at 75, then have a son at about 100 years old. I don't think any guy over 50 would want to be having to deal with a 1-year-old, a newborn, 1-year-old, 2-year-old, and all the fun that goes with that. But God promised Abraham that he would become the father of a great nation, and his descendants will be numerous. As we see in Genesis 12, they had to wait for the promised child. The waiting tested their faith. Abraham and Sarah, again, were advanced in their age. And it was very hard to believe that how could God deliver on his promise? We're well past our ages of being able to have children. Their waiting forced them to wrestle with the question, will we trust God even when we don't see how his promise can happen? And with Abraham and Sarah, they tried solving that problem themselves, and that did not go very well for them, unfortunately. Sarah gave Hagar to Abraham, and Ishmael was born, but Ishmael was not the promised son. We can see that by us trying to force things and doing things ourselves, we can oftentimes cause more harm to ourselves. This can cause problems, and God's timing can be different from our timing. That's something we need to understand. But Isaac's birth showed that God was the one who fulfilled the promise. We see that Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah was 90 when Isaac was born. And God delivered his promise in his time, not theirs. Their ages made it clear that Isaac's birth wasn't the result of them being perfect peak health and peak condition, but it showed that God's faithfulness and power, that he would deliver his promise. God was always working during their waiting, and they often struggled with that, as we can often struggle with our waiting as well. And we see with Isaac, it was part of a much bigger story, that Isaac became the father of Jacob, Jacob became the father of 12 tribes of Israel, and eventually Israel leads to the coming of Jesus. So Joseph had to wait for his position. Abraham and Sarah waited for God's promise. And we see the waiting wasn't wasted time, as God was working during the waiting and preparing them. Faith didn't mean they never struggled. It meant they eventually learned to continue to trust God's promises. One of the most well-known examples is Job. I mean, we all know the story of Job. He suffered through such tumultuous and terrible tragedies in his life, losing his lands, losing his wealth, losing his family, and eventually losing his health. But the important thing is, he didn't learn exactly why he had to go through it. He didn't know exactly the reason for the suffering. At first, he responded with worship and accepted that he didn't really understand what God was doing, as we see in Job chapter 1. But his waiting wasn't passive. He was asking questions. He was grieving. He was crying out to God. And his friends tried to help, but that did not go very well, as they did not really truly understand what was going on. And Job didn't pretend that he was okay. He was honestly crying out in pain and told God honestly how much he was hurting. And again, God didn't immediately explain everything. That's one of the biggest lessons from Job, that God answered him, but didn't fully explain everything. Job wanted an answer to, why is this happening to me? That's a question we often ask ourselves. But for much of the book, he didn't get an answer. Job had to learn to trust God without having all the information. That's something that is difficult for us to accept, that we can't always have everything. We can't have an answer to all the questions we ask. Job eventually encountered God in Job 42, verse 5, that God showed Job his greatness and his wisdom, and Job responded, I had heard about you before, but now I have seen you with my own eyes. Job had to trust God without knowing the reason why he was suffering. The waiting changed his relationship with God. And it shows that the waiting doesn't mean God is absent. As we see in Job 42:5, God often gives his presence instead of explanations. And that's something, again, that is very difficult for us to accept, that we can't have answers to everything. We just have to trust that God is present and there with us in those times. So Abraham and Sarah, they had to wait for God's promise. Joseph had to wait for God's purpose. And Job was waiting for God's answer. And in all three, God was doing something even when they couldn't see it. Waiting isn't easy, but it's that waiting that can develop our faith when we don't have control over timing or the explanation. And finally, we have Jesus. We see in Matthew 27, verses 12 through 14. When Jesus was brought before Pilate, it reads, "And while he was being accused by the chief priests and elders, he did not answer. Then Pilate said to him, 'Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?' And he did not answer him with regard to even a single charge. So the governor was quite amazed." Pilate was amazed that Jesus didn't try to defend himself. But that's because Jesus knew what was happening. Just like David said on the table this morning, Jesus knew what was going to be coming. And that shows Jesus' self-control and his trust. He had the power to escape it, but he didn't. He could have escaped all that suffering and all that pain through his own power. As we sing that song, he could have called 10,000 angels to destroy the world and set him free. But he died alone for you and me. Jesus had to wait while he was being mocked. The soldiers beat him, they scourged him, they placed a crown of thorns on his head, they mocked him, belittled him, spat upon him, and they led him away to be crucified. As we see in Matthew 27 through 31, we just read that he went through humiliation, excruciating, painful humiliation. And again, he could have stopped it at any time, but he waited. He could have stopped it, but he endured it. It wasn't a weakness, it was obedience. And finally, Jesus waited through the crucifixion. Matthew 27:46, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Even in a moment of anguish, Jesus remained faithful to the mission that he had. He had come to accomplish everlasting victory over death, and he stayed the course. He continued to wait. Jesus continued to wait for God's purpose to be completed. He didn't stop it before it was finished. He waited through until it was fully completed. He went through the pain and the agony and the misery of the cross. He died upon the cross. He was placed in the tomb, and he rose again on the third day. But I wonder how the disciples must have felt in those 3 days waiting. For them, everything had just gone wrong. Their teacher, their master, their leader, and their friend had just been put to death. Excruciatingly, death. And they had to go through the silence of the 3 days before an answer was given. And that answer, as we see in Matthew 28, was him rising from the dead and defeating death. Sometimes God's greatest works happen when everything seems like it's been lost. But we always have to remember he is always there reaching out for us, begging us to take his hand and to trust him. So we see with Abraham and Sarah, what they had to wait through was years without a promised son. But Isaac was born. Joseph had to go through years of slavery and imprisonment, but he became a leader and saved lives. Job had to go through suffering without an explanation, but he encountered God more deeply. And Jesus suffered, was crucified, and placed in the tomb, but he rose again and gave us the everlasting victory over death. So, what is it that we can do? How can we respond to periods of waiting, of stillness, of wanting an answer, wanting things to go our way? Well, for us, that can look like someone searching for work for months, parents praying for their children as they're going through whatever trials they are going through, as a spouse caring for another spouse that's going through injury or illness, or a congregation praying for growth and strength when time seems slow. The common thread with all of those is faithful people continue to serve while they wait. So what can we do? We can keep trusting in God. Waiting doesn't mean doing nothing. You don't want to be like SpongeBob and Patrick, pull out the magic conch shell and ask it, what do we do? And it says nothing, and then do nothing. We don't want to do that. It means continuing to believe that God is working even when you can't see it. 2 Corinthians 5:7 says, we walk by faith, not by sight. Stay faithful with what you have. We have so much to be thankful for in this country, in this part of the country, and the United States in general. There's so many things that we can overlook and not realize that we have been so incredibly blessed. Joseph didn't know his situation would change from prison, from slavery, but he continued to do his job as a servant, as a prisoner, and eventually as a leader. He continued to trust in God and do what was in front of him. So stay faithful with what you have. Pray honestly. Job didn't shy away from his emotions. Job didn't try to man up, suck it up. He didn't try to store it all inside, where that only does problems. He told God exactly how he was feeling. You can tell God, I'm scared. Lord, I'm frustrated. I don't like this. I hate this, what I'm going through. I don't understand. How much longer, Lord? Please help me trust you. God wants us to always be honest with him at all times, in all things. As it says, cast all your cares and anxieties upon him, for he cares for you. Don't force an outcome. Abraham and Sarah tried to do that, and that created problems for them. It shows that they even struggled, but we can't try to force things. We oftentimes will try to white knuckle life. We want the control, we want the power, we want to be able to do what it is we want in the moment right now, and we're just causing problems for ourselves trying to white knuckle life. We're tempted to say, if God isn't doing it, I'll make it happen myself. I'll do it myself. Forget you. Forget you, God. I don't want to wait anymore. I'm tired of it. That's only going to make problems. Keep doing what is right. Jesus showed that. He knew the suffering was coming. He knew pain, agony, and misery were coming. But he remained obedient, and he followed through and did what was right. He followed through till the plan was completed. Let the waiting change you. It isn't about getting what we're waiting for sometimes. We not often get the thing that we truly want, but we have to be able to say, Lord, I trust you, and it is well with my soul. Whatever your will, Lord, I trust that it is the better thing and the best thing for me. Joseph became a different person during his waiting. Job's understanding of God deepened, and Abraham's faith was tested and developed even further than he could have imagined. Remember that waiting has an end. It didn't end with Abraham and Sarah waiting until they died. It didn't end with Joseph suffering in the prison. It didn't end with Job continuously suffering. And it did not end with Jesus buried in the tomb. But God's plan continued. So I would encourage us to pray. If you're going through a season of waiting in the silence, pray, trust, stay faithful, do what's in front of you. Don't force what you can't control, and let God shape you in that waiting. I think the biggest takeaway would probably be this, that waiting is not wasted time when you're walking with God. These are some verses that I looked through as I was preparing for this, that should be on the handout as well, that highlight this concept. Psalms 27:14. Wait for the Lord, be strong and take heart. Wait for the Lord. Psalm 62:5. Yes, my soul, find rest in God. My hope comes from him. Romans 8:25. But if we hope for what we do not yet have, we wait for it patiently. James 1:2-4. Consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And Lamentations 3:25-26. The Lord is good to those whose hope is in him. To the one who seeks him, it is good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. So in closing, our waiting is never wasted when it's placed in God's hands. As we're going through it, God wants us to be honest with him. Lord, I'm struggling. I'm hurting. Help me. Help me in this time of stillness, time of silence. Lord, I need your help. I can only rely on you, as you are the giver of all things good, as you are the ruler and master of all creation. We may not understand his timing, but we can trust God's character, that he is merciful, that he's loving, that he's all-knowing, and that he always wants what's best for us. So Romans 8:28 says, all things come together for good, and for those who love and trust the Lord. So, if you're in a waiting season or a season of silence today, don't mistake God's silence for God's absence. The same God who was working in Joseph's prison, through Abraham and Sarah's waiting, Job's suffering, and the silence of the tomb is still working today. And again, we may not understand his timing, but we can trust God's character to always see us through whatever difficulties or trials or tribulations we are going through. God will always have us. No matter what periods of waiting we're going through, trust in God. Pray without ceasing, and always do what the Lord would have you to do. So with that, the lesson is yours. And if there's anyone that is not yet baptized, I encourage you to come forward as we now stand together and sing a song of invitation.